Welcome back to the channel. Today we're in the H10's tender for probably the last time. Our goal today is we're going to remove these screens so we can get to the front of the tender, remove all the rust on the bottom and scale, and allow us to get to the front to sandblast and paint the inside completely. We have to remove these screens here. There's one on this side of the tender and then one on the other side. The point of these screens was to stop any big debris from getting to the front of the tender. So in the front of the tender, there are two pickup tubes, one on each side for each injector, which takes the water and sends it into the locomotive. There's an additional screen up front, but they wanted to make sure that any big scale or debris wouldn't actually fit through here. And most of the time what would happen was all the scale and debris would settle down to the bottom of the tender. So the whole bottom would be filled with rust and things, but these holes up top would still be free because, think about it, the rust is going to sink to the bottom because it's heavier than the water. So that's the goal today. The strategy for today is I'm going to die grind. I'm going to cut these nuts and bolts off. I am not going to attempt to heat them up and remove them with the torch. The reason being, and I'll show everybody a zoomed in look, these bolts are extremely rusty to the point where the bolt threads that allow the nuts to screw on are completely gone, and they look fused with the nut. Once you get to that point with metal in terms of bolts and nuts, you just got to cut them off and deal with the fallout from that. But I'm not going to waste any more time than I have to cutting these, heating them up with a torch. I'm going to cut these out and get them out of the way. So that's on the list of what we're going to do today. Looking at a close-up of this nut and bolt that I was talking about, I wanted to show everybody kind of what complete rust corrosion looks like when you have a couple pieces of hardware together. You can see right here, this is where the bolt came through and the threads would have kind of showed. You can see how, if you didn't look twice at it, you would see how it almost looks like it's one piece together. And once it gets like that, it's pretty much needs completely replaced. We can look up at this other one here quick, and it's very similar. You should be able to see here a defined bolt coming through, and you can see it a little bit, but it almost looks like it's one piece. And that's, whenever you do work like this, that's going to be the key. If I'm looking at this and I see that it looks like it's just one giant blob of metal, I'm going to have to either torch cut it completely off, die grind it off. I'm beyond the point where it's reasonable to try to save the components. From a time element, there's going to be situations where you might have the time or want to do it. But in this case, for what we're doing here, I'm just going to cut these off. So we're going to get our PPE on and we're going to start working on these. One last thing before we get started today is I just wanted to show everybody I'm bringing my usual assortment of PPE. I have my respirator back. I have a new filter in it so I can breathe nice and easy. I have my cutting discs. I have my hat. I have gloves, and most importantly, I have a face shield. I didn't talk about this much, and since I'm talking a little bit about die grinder safety, these face shields are important, not because they block you from sparks, which is important. These are also to a degree impact resistant. So if the grinder comes through, these actually are able to withstand so much force against them, which is why they're really important. This to me is one of the most important things that you can use when you're die grinding, these face shields. They protect the top of your head, they protect your face. Many pictures out there, and again, I'm not going to get involved with this, many pictures out there of guys using these getting saved because the grind disc went through and almost hit them. Always, 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 always wear your safety glasses on top of these. These will take a hit, but safety glasses are rated for hits. So these will add a second layer of protection that is super important. So always, always wear PPE. So sometimes I get this a lot. Sometimes in my head when I'm trying to plan out exactly what I'm going to do, I have an idea in my head and I go to try it, and in my head it worked way better than in practice. And I'll be the first one to admit this. Part of me with this channel is I want everybody to kind of experience the whole process of me doing this. I'm kind of new to this restoration process. I've been welding for 10 years, 12 years now, but sometimes I'm still getting used to doing these things. So for example, you'll see there's a video of me, the video right before this of me trying to cut these, and I cut into them and they're a lot harder than I thought. And I'm sure some of you are out there were probably yelling at me before I even started. They're like, don't waste your time die grinding them. I'm going to get the long torch. I'm going to torch these out. I just didn't like the angles I was dealing with. I didn't like how on these ones I'm going to have to work against the wheel. It's going to take a long time. And I was thinking with the hole I put in here a couple episodes ago, I should be able to fish the torch up here with minimal length. And I found over the weekend, I found one of the torches we have has an extended hose. It's way longer. I like showing this because it's important. I feel like on a lot of these videos that the creators feel like they have to be perfect when they do it, like everything's got to go perfect. I'll be the first one to admit I don't know everything there is to know. I'm learning every day. Some of you watching this might have been like, Mike, you should have probably just torch cut these to begin with. And going forward, I will do that. But in my head, I was like, oh, I'll just cut these and it'll be okay. But like even looking at this middle one, there's a massive amount of metal here, and it would just be a waste of my time to die grind this. So I'm gonna go get the torch. I'll show everybody me torch cutting these out, but I think that's gonna be the best way forward from here. And Alright, so I got everything cut off, and it was nice because these grates came off pretty easy. I'm going to grab the camera and I'm going to show everybody what the pickup tube looks like, what the screen around it looks like, and just how much debris is in the front of the tender, which was the whole reason why we had to cut these out. So we can get a good look at this now. So there's the pickup tube, and you can see right here, this is where, there's a lot of shadows. This is where the floor is, and this is almost full all the way up to the top with just, it looks like mud. It's a combination of like rust, water, and probably a little bit of dirt too from the water over the years. But it's kind of cool to think like when the last time someone was actually in this is probably very good chance it was in the 50s. It had never been removed. There's the pickup tube for the injector. You can see how far the screen goes up. So part of the idea with this is that they knew that this scaling would happen over time. So they just let the bottom of the tender fill up a little bit. And you can see the screen goes well high enough that that's really not an issue. But for us, with trying to preserve this, it is. So I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side, and then I'm going to show everybody when that's done. Well, that about wraps it up for the interior work inside the tender, other than cleaning it out. I'm going to do one more shoot. Probably I'm going to highlight kind of a before and after of what the tender looked like, and then what it looks like now that it's been cleaned up and all this rust is out of it. What you'll notice, and I'll talk a little bit about it, but what you'll notice is now the tender is nice and dry inside, which is what we want. We don't want moisture trapped in here to continue to deteriorate it. And now it's ready for sandblast and paint, which will stabilize it for quite a number of years until we can get to it once the B6 is done. So hopefully, thanks for joining me with this. I hope you learned a little bit of something. I learned something, and I'm supposed to be teaching everybody out there. So have a good one. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you on the next video.